On October 24, 1593, a Spanish soldier named Gil Pérez was stationed at the Palacio del Gobernador in Manila, part of the Captaincy General of the Philippines. The night before, Governor Gómez Pérez Dasmariñas had been assassinated by Chinese pirates. Despite the turmoil, the palace guards remained at their posts, awaiting the appointment of a new governor. As Pérez stood watch, he started feeling dizzy and was overcome with exhaustion. He leaned against a wall, closed his eyes, and allowed himself a moment to recover. When Pérez opened his eyes just moments later, he was no longer in Manila. To his shock, he found himself in Mexico City, in the viceroyalty of New Spain, thousands of kilometers across the ocean. Disoriented and confused, he was quickly noticed by local guards, who became suspicious of his unfamiliar uniform and began questioning him. Unaware of how he had arrived there, Pérez identified himself as a palace guard from Manila and spoke of Governor Dasmariñas' assassination, a piece of news that had not yet reached Mexico City. The authorities, skeptical of Pérez's story, arrested him, accusing him of being a servant of the devil while officials investigated his claims. Months later, a galleon from the Philippines arrived in Mexico, and with it, bringing official news of Governor Dasmariñas' assassination. Among the passengers was a man who recognized Gil Pérez and testified that he had seen him in Manila the day after the governor's death, an impossibility, given that Pérez had been found in Mexico that same day. With this new evidence, the authorities had no choice but to release Pérez, who was eventually allowed to return home. His bizarre and unexplained journey remains one of history's most puzzling stories, leaving open the question of how Gil Pérez traveled thousands of kilometers in an instant. In the early hours of October 11, 1945, two police officers in Jacksonville, Illinois, discovered a young black teenager wandering the streets alone. It quickly became clear that he was deaf and unable to communicate verbally. When asked for his name, he could only write Lewis, which was believed to be his identity. However, no records or relatives could be found to confirm his background. With no way to determine his identity or family, a judge ordered him to be placed in the Illinois mental health system, where he would become known as John Doe 24, a name that would define the rest of his life. John Doe 24, believed to have been born in 1929, spent decades within the Illinois mental health system without a confirmed identity. In 1978, his name was legally changed to John Doe Boyd to enable him to apply for Social Security benefits, marking a small but significant step in officially recognizing his existence. After spending decades in mental health institutions, during which he gradually lost his sight, John Doe Boyd was transferred to the Smiley Living Center in Peoria, Illinois, in 1987. On November 28, 1993, Boyd passed away from a stroke at the estimated age of 64. To this day, no one knows who he truly was or where he came from, leaving behind a life of mystery and unanswered questions. Born near Lyon, France, sometime around 1772, Tarrare was known as a man unlike any other in history, an anomaly for his insatiable hunger that defied any medical or logical reason. Beginning in his childhood, Tarrare's hunger was relentless. By his teenage years, he could and would consume his own body weight in food each day. His never-ending appetite eventually became too much for his own family to handle. They were simply unable to financially keep up with his endless eating and kicked him out of the home. Forced to survive on the streets, Tarrare joined a gang of thieves and beggars, scavenging and stealing just to feed his seemingly infinite appetite. But it wasn't long before he figured out how to turn his unique gift of eating into a spectacle, ultimately becoming a traveling performer who stunned crowds by his eating abilities, for both food and other items. He would eat stones, snakes, corks, and live animals. Despite his grotesque diet, Tarrare remained strangely thin. But his overall appearance was far from ordinary. His mouth was unnervingly large, stretching nearly 4 inches wide, lined with stained teeth and thin lips. When hungry, his skin hung loose around his body, but after a feast, his stomach would swell like a massive balloon. His cheeks were so pliable he could stretch them to fit a dozen eggs or apples inside his mouth at once. But Tarrare's bizarre ability to eat came at the cost of his physical health. His body was unnaturally hot to the touch, and he was constantly drenched in sweat. A foul, almost unbearable stench followed him everywhere, so overwhelming that people claimed they couldn't stand to be within 20 feet of him. And that was before a meal. After a meal, the odor only intensified. His eyes would redden, his cheeks flushed as if feverish, and a strange vapor seemed to rise from his skin. He would grow sluggish, belching loudly while his jaws moved in unconscious swallowing motions. However, Tarrare's outside appearance refused to change in the long term. No matter how much he ate, he never gained weight. And though he was said to suffer from relentless diarrhea, he never seemed to grow weak. Those who knew him found no signs of madness in his behavior, only a strange, detached apathy, as if his mind, like his stomach, could never be satisfied. By 1792, Tarrare found himself in an unexpected role, that of a soldier for the French Revolutionary Army. But the battlefield had no mercy for a man with his insatiable hunger. Even when his rations were quadrupled, it wasn't enough. Desperate, he scavenged through gutters and trash, eating whatever scraps he could find. Yet starvation still consumed him. Weak and malnourished, he collapsed from exhaustion and was sent to a military hospital. But Tarrare was no ordinary patient. Military doctors, intrigued by his unnatural appetite, subjected him to a series of disturbing experiments. They tested the limits of his hunger, pushing him further each time. He devoured a meal meant for 15 men in a single sitting. He swallowed live cats, snakes, lizards, and even puppies. He was given eels, alive and writhing, and downed them whole without so much as a bite. Military surgeons, seeing an opportunity, proposed Tarrare's unique eating ability be used for war. They presented him to French General Alexandre de Beauharnais with a daring plan. He would become a spy. His mission would be to swallow secret documents, slip behind enemy lines, and retrieve them once safely across. It seemed foolproof. But war has little patience for the bizarre. On his very first mission, Tarrare was captured by Prussian forces. He was beaten mercilessly, interrogated, and subjected to a horrifying mock execution. Tarrare stood at the brink of death, before at the last moment, the Prussians decided he was more pathetic than threatening, and they released him. Humiliated and broken after his failed mission, Tarrare was desperate. He begged doctors to cure his unbearable hunger, submitting himself to any treatment they could devise. But nothing worked. No medicine, no diet, no desperate attempt to control his cravings could stop the insatiable void inside him. Unable to resist, he would sneak out of the hospital at night to linger outside local butcher shops, feasting on scraps like a starving animal. But it didn't stop there. Unsettling rumors began to spread like wildfire among the hospital staff. Some swore they saw him in the morgue, hovering over the dead, his rabid hunger driving him to feast on corpses. But then, the horror reached its peak. A 1-year-old child vanished from the hospital. There were no witnesses, no evidence, only suspicion. And all suspicion pointed to Tarrare. The hospital had seen enough. A mob formed, chasing him from the grounds, driving him into the wilderness. And with that, Tarrare disappeared. For 4 years, he was nothing more than a ghost. A monstrous legend whispered in the streets of France. Then, in 1798, he reappeared. Sick. Dying. His body, ravaged by tuberculosis, was finally failing him. In Versailles, weak and frail, Tarrare succumbed to his fate. But even in death, his body held one final horror. During his autopsy, surgeons discovered the true extent of his condition. His throat, unnaturally wide, led directly to a stomach that dominated his entire abdominal cavity, stretched and ulcerated from years of unspeakable consumption. His organs, his liver, his gallbladder, were swollen and filled with pus, his insides corrupted beyond recognition. Tarrare was a medical mystery, a man with a hunger that defied all logic. To this day, his story remains one of the most bizarre in history. The Countess of Desmond, believed to be a woman by the name of Catherine Fitzgerald, was a noblewoman of 16th and 17th century Ireland. What makes the Countess's story remarkable is the astonishing claim that she lived to be approximately 140 years old, a feat that sets her apart from almost every other historical figure. Writers from the time period documented that the Countess, even after her purported 100th birthday, would walk several miles every week to her local town market, demonstrating an impressive vitality well into her later years. One of the most well-known mentions of her age comes from Sir Walter Raleigh, the 17th century historian, who referenced her in his work, History of the World. Raleigh claimed that the Countess married during the reign of King Edward IV, which would have made her at least 135 years old when she passed away. The English writer Sir Francis Bacon also referenced the Countess of Desmond's extraordinary lifespan in his work History of Life, asserting that she was 140 years old at the time of her death. One of the most frequently cited stories surrounding her death is that the Countess tragically passed away after falling from a cherry tree at the age of 140. According to the tale, despite her advanced age, she was still active, climbing the tree to pick cherries when she lost her footing and fell to her death. However, the accuracy of these claims is nearly impossible to verify. Birth and death records from her time are scarce, and much of the information about her life and death comes from secondhand sources and writings that have been found from the time period. As a result, her true age at the time of her death remains a mystery. Fulcanelli is a name forever linked to alchemy, knowledge, and an unexplained disappearance for the ages. Fulcanelli is widely believed to have been a French alchemist and scholar active during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, yet his true identity remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Various theories suggest he may have been a nobleman, a scientist, or even a collective pseudonym used by multiple individuals. Some researchers speculate that Fulcanelli was actually Jules Violle, a renowned French physicist, while others argue he was Jean-Julien Champagne, an artist and alchemical enthusiast closely associated with Fulcanelli's work. Despite these theories, no definitive proof has ever surfaced. In life, Fulcanelli was best known for his two influential books on alchemy and sacred architecture. In these works, Fulcanelli proposed that medieval cathedral builders encoded alchemical secrets into stone, linking architecture to the transformation of matter. His ideas captivated occultists, scholars, and seekers of hidden knowledge. The mystery surrounding Fulcanelli is his sudden and unexplained disappearance in the 1920s. It's as if one day he simply disappeared off the face of the earth. His last known interaction was with his pupil, Eugène Cancellier, who claimed that Fulcanelli had unlocked the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary substance said to turn base metals into gold and grant immortality. Rumors range from Fulcanelli becoming a reclusive exile to having achieved some form of transcendence. Decades would pass until, in 1954, Eugène Cancellier reported an incredible encounter with Fulcanelli. According to Eugène Cancellier, Fulcanelli appeared far younger than before, as though he had somehow reversed the aging process. This extraordinary claim only fueled speculation that Fulcanelli may have indeed discovered the secret to eternal life. Whether Fulcanelli was a genuine alchemist who mastered the secrets of transformation, or simply an intellectual who cleverly encoded his knowledge, his legend persists.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.